and if people want to jump in, they can. And I will be recording, so I'm turning the record on as we speak. Okay, I think we are recording into the cloud, which is perfect. Okay, excellent. So anybody who's late will be able to start from the beginning. So today, September 27th, 2025, this is the IPS Deprogram, and we're in a Zoom conference. I'm going to discuss each topic and all the information I have on it, and then I'll invite the guests to join in and offer their comments and anything that I've missed, and then we'll go back. So here's a list of the topics. And if you're on YouTube, you can get into the Zoom conference. Just go to the newsletter I sent out, the live notification, and the link is right there. The password is IPS. So we want to talk about the Jezebel witches, the controlled opposition, in two areas. So the controlled opposition is active right now with regard to the Charlie Kirk event and the narrative surrounding it, and they're uniform. That's one of the points here I want to make, is that their reaction is uniform. And then second, Snake Eyes, the quote predictive programming within Snake Eyes is going pretty much viral. Everybody's talking about it, but none of them have the right interpretation, and this is a guardrailed issue. I'm not saying everyone talking about it is a shill, but it's being promoted. A lot of people who don't do conspiracy content are suddenly doing these concerned videos sitting in their cars where they have like 100,000 subs. They're usually pushing QAnon or something. And now they release some concerned video where they're talking about how eerie it is that the movie mirrors reality and nobody knows what's going on. Yeah, that's by design. It's muddying the waters. It's disinfo. It's actually just distracting from the facts and mystifying it. And a lot of people did run with the wrong date. And Newsweek talked about this. So Newsweek talked about Snake Eyes. And one of the things they pointed out is that everybody got the date wrong. So if your list of bullet points is Charlie Kirkland gets shot on 9/10, well, you got the name. He gets shot in the neck. You got the type of shooting. It's all accurate, right? However, if the next it goes into, you guys got the date wrong. So you're not on all your facts. So it's kind of like an instant discredit. So first of all, let's go into the topics one by one. The first one is Jezebel witches. So I didn't put this in my video, which I am not really inclined to play right now, but I guess I should, because I can go ahead and just play the whole thing with the audio. Again, if you're on YouTube, you're not going to be able to hear this. So what I'm pointing out here is that there's an overlap in themes between the Charlie Kirk event and Snake Eyes, but not just Snake Eyes, but also the Hulu series, The Tempest, which goes much deeper. But one of the elements I didn't really focus on was the significance of Jezebel. And there's quite a rabbit trail here, but the Jezebel thing I think has some significance because it brings in the witchcraft element. And there's another movie and associated shooting which we've discussed recently, this being Weapons, and as Weapons relates to this Charlie Kirk event, and Weapons being associated with the Annunciation school shooting. So we have that. Well, if you haven't seen Weapons, the antagonist is a witch, a red-headed witch. So what does that mean? Well, we're talking about this witchcraft thing with Jezebel, the red-headed shooter, and then the Annunciation shooter had some association with the neo-Nazi fascist satanic group Order of the Nine Angels, this group that supposedly blends Satanism and terrorism. Now, we're talking about manufactured martyrs, like Charlie Kirk, manufactured shooters. These are constructs. And this is one of the points we're going to get to with regard to the guard railing. But let me go ahead and play and this is just going to run for about 10 minutes. I might interrupt it. I'll try not to, but this is Snake Eyes, Charlie Kirk, Kirkland Sheen, The Tempest. And if you're okay, now one more point. We were talking about the Joe Rogan conversation with Charlie Kirk and how it eerily mirrored what happened in real life. They were talking about getting sniped. Joe Rogan pretended like he was shot for some weird reason. They talked about JFK. Then they announced the Charlie Kirk thing. Well, interestingly, right now on Tucker Carlson, the latest guest is Charlie Sheen. And he's talking about the widow in particular. So there's quite a lot going on here. But we're talking about how the media ecosystem is saturated from every single propaganda vector. It's not simply movies. It's not simply the entertainment, but it's also, it's the podcast, but it's also the Twitter sphere. It's everywhere. Thank you, Till. Appreciate that. Again, if you're not going to hear this if you're on YouTube, we're in Zoom right now for a lot of reasons. It's because after each of these topics, we want to take some comments from others. So again, here we go. If you're listening, this is going to be the video that's actually pinned on my Twitter account right now. All right, so what we have here, and this is just the main part I wanted to focus on, is that this story Snake Eyes happens in the midst of a storm, actually a hurricane, Hurricane Jezebel. But the news media specifically call it a storm because they want to downplay it, because they don't want to dissuade people from showing up at the fight. So we have Hurricane Jezebel brought into the equation. And that's the main thing I wanted to bring up, because Snake Eyes and the storm mirrors or has a connection now with the Tempest. So the Tempest, which again is a storm, opens up with a Charlie Kirk-esque character in a church, which again, Kirk Church, who gets shot in the neck exactly where Charlie Kirk is shot. That movie came out on 9/10. So now we're talking about a handful of Charlie Kirk-esque characters with analogous wounds. And the Tempest, the storm, overlap. And then after the assassination at the memorial, and I'll play that clip here. There's a couple of clips, but the one I want to focus on is Stephen Miller refers to Erica as the storm. So you have this direct connection. She is the storm. And really quick, if you look at the images of the character that I'm saying corresponds to Charlie Kirk. First of all, Charlie Kirk was there in South Korea 4 days before, at this place where where the series Hulu takes place. And he was addressing the young Christian Republicans, just like the character. And if you look at the character, he kind of has the same demeanor. Sparked a fire in the hearts of the youth. So here you have Charlie Kirk being prayed over by this congregation 4 days before. Prayers go out to Charlie's family. Okay, so now fast forward. The next scene is the widow who takes over the organization in The Tempest is just like Erica Kirk, the widow, taking over. And in The Tempest, she's given a prefabricated speech. She's told that she has to have a, quote, triple axle moment to show vulnerability to win the election. She has to be able to cry on camera. And so I juxtaposed Kirk, Erica Kirk, and her corresponding Hulu character. Now, what's fascinating here as I play these side by side, the scenes are identical. But what I want to point out is that one of the facets of analyzing predictive and concurrent programming is the recognition that the actors in these movies that contain elements that foreshadow real events, they're often connected to real people. I mean, as in, you do have these consistent patterns. And we often talk about this specifically with Donald Trump. How many actors or characters portrayed him in some fictional way? So let me just play this clip really quick. You see, anyway, I'm just noting the overlap between these two themes, and the episode ends with a submarine launch. Oh, by the way, that character even says he's worried about how easily he can be taken out, which is something that Kirk was also engaging in. Now, I'm not going to play that whole video. I just wanted to bring up this thing about the storm. So let's get into that, because I think, again, Erica Kirk was called The Storm by Stephen Miller. I may have that part here, but you get the gist of it. Now, as this thing rolls forward, you have conspiracy theorists now saying that TPUSA was taken over by Israel. And this all ties into this template of, you got the main shooter and who's the patsy, and then the real culprit. And this is just like with JFK. And by the way, this is a hoax indicator. Anytime one of these events perfectly aligns with a previous event in all of these various aspects, if it seems to be a template, yeah, that's an indication that it's probably fake. Reality isn't this predictable. And we made too many accurate predictions about this one to even entertain that. Okay, so next, let's go into the witch thing, because this connects with everything else. This is actually an area that I want to specifically focus on. So if you followed some of the story, you had this article come out where Erica Kirk claims that 2 days before, she and her husband, Charlie, were worried about these witches. Yeah, the witches of... So, reportedly, there's this group of witches called the Jezebel witches who put a curse on Charlie, and then 2 days later, that happens. And so this has become kind of a bigger story. And I kind of ignored it at first until I realized that the storm in the Snake Eyes movie is called Jezebel. So Jezebel witches and Hurricane Jezebel. Now let me bring up the image of, here we go. Erica Kirk was genuinely rattled after Jezebel witches paid on Etsy to curse her husband, and then 2 days later he was assassinated. So this article just came out. So a couple of things about it. Again, we're talking about this general theme of the Jezebel witches and how it relates to everything else. So here we have a curse associated with both not only a witch, but with the assassination itself. So if you've seen the movie Weapons, the movie Weapons revolves around a witch. And this witch has red hair, which I think is significant in this context. And this red-headed witch is called, her name is Aunt Gladys. And you can see her image here. The actress is actually the sister of, I believe, Ed Harris. I saw the resemblance. So again, this is the witch, the red-headed witch, who in the movie Weapons is behind the entire classroom of children disappearing. So if you look at the subtext there, what it really is saying, it's a school shooting analogy. What's up, Tell Live Vision? Here is your blue wrench. If you're in YouTube, I'm actually referencing the screen that you have to be in Zoom to see it. So we're talking about Gladys the witch, this red-headed witch, who the whole thing is about her doing spells, and the witchcraft stuff is pretty dark. It involves blood. But anyway, Aunt Gladys kills or takes all the children in the classroom, with the exception of one, Alex Lilly, who I contend is Adam Lanza. Because again, this is all just allegory. But there is this scene that really stands out where there's a big AR-15 floating above the house, and it has the numbers 217 on it. So this led people to ask, well, what is the significance of 217? Well, 217 has a very specific connotation. It relates to a gun control ban, the assault weapon ban of 2022. And it passed the House of Representatives by 217 votes. However, the bill was not brought for a vote on the Senate. So it's just sort of this do-nothing thing, but 217, so it's kind of an ironic reference, but it's also a direct reference. But now, consider this. We're talking about the Jezebel witch and in the movie Weapons associated with 217. Well, then you have the Annunciation school shooting. And the Annunciation school shooting features a shooter who, like Gladys, has got red hair and has the association of witchcraft through the Satanic Order of Nine Angels, the pentagram stuff, along with a lot of other things as well. It was kind of a list of things. But if you look at the mass shooter, brought up as this, far left, kind of confusingly anti everything. I mean, I don't know what you call this person overall, but this character is very much like Aunt Gladys, incomprehensible to children. Like you can look at the Aunt Gladys character and the analogy of the witch taking the children as more comprehensible to children. And interestingly enough, the Annunciation school shooting was communicated to us through children. They had children crisis actors, which is horrible. But you have these children who are describing the shooting. So you have child voices. Well, the movie, the Weapons movie itself is narrated by a child. So that can't be a coincidence. And there's other elements here which I can point to in the imagery that even further deepens these connections. For example, the image of the family, running towards the school, and you see this woman, you see the bottom of her feet as she's running, and it perfectly matches the movie poster. And the way the children run is actually a big part of the story. But now, let me get back to this red-headed witch theme as it pertains to the shooting. So it turns out that the address of Turning Point USA, weirdly enough, is 217. And these numbers are highly significant, like 1/6, January 6th, the 1.6 million rounds at Waco. And that's ultimately what this comes back to. It all goes back to Waco, which is where Trump kicked off his campaign, not coincidentally, on the heels of Netflix releasing Waco, An American Apocalypse. So Turning Point USA, 217 East Illinois Street. Well, Kirk was being queried about weapons and weapons bans. They were talking about weapons when he was shot, and this was pointed out as ironic. No, it's not ironic. I mean, it's ironic, but it was written to be ironic. So this guy can be shown as like, hey, look, he said, hey, it's worth a few deaths every year to have Second Amendment, and then he gets shot. So this has been used as a talking point. But then also, who is the shooter? Well, the shooter is associated with, they've described the shooter as basically Antifa, trans, furry. So a violent, furry, trans Antifa. So they create this amalgamation that is frightening to the right in the way that white bull-cut neo-Nazi shooters are frightening to the left. These are both constructs. But this shooter, by association with his significant other, is actually now associated with the Annunciation shooter, who there is also associated with Gladys the Witch in the contemporaneous programming. So now, again, this is all tying back to Erica Kirk and her being rattled by the Jezebel witches. And now, here's the thing. The storm, the Hurricane Jezebel, And then in Tempest, the storm. And then, of course, Erica Kirk being called the Storm. Yeah, in the Tempest, the Storm is the woman who takes over her husband's organization and changes the system. Like, it's basically, she's a metaphor. She's a personification of the storm. So now this is getting kind of interesting, however, because if Jezebel witches are connected to his death, it somewhat implies that Erica Kirk could be the Jezebel witch. Now this is interesting. Jezebel was the, biblically speaking, the Tyranian princess, queen of Israel, married King Ahab, promoted Baal worship. But you do have this, the name Tyler, and then you got, the Tyre, Tyre, daughter of Tyre. And this is a reoccurring association we have with these various events. There's a lot of anagrams, like, for example, Tyreek Hill and Tyree Nichols. We're talking about BLM martyrs. And this is all connected because within the martyr narrative, you often find the subtext of the Masonic martyrdom of Hiram Abiff. So this is all significant in the bigger picture, in the subtext of the story here, but I want to really focus here on this Jezebel thing with Erica Kirk. So just as an example, let me go ahead and show you, as one example, what Stu Peters is saying. Because Stu Peters is representative of the woke right. He's representative of the red pill woke right. Stu Peters says, she was selected for her role long before they were introduced. And Charlie likely never realized he was playing with the fire that would ultimately burn him. She's an actress playing her part. So this is the narrative now, that Kirk is a victim not of left-wing violence, but rather of Israel and neocons trying to take over that seat. And so you have this split in the Republicans between the pro-Israel and the anti, or neocons and woke right. It's actually quite simple. Well, the woke right also contains the red pill right. So the red pill right and the woke right are all saying that she was a part of this, that this was an assassination that she was behind. And this was insinuated in The Tempest. Others insinuated this. But now, the reason why this is significant here, I would contend, is that this is an engineered narrative. You see, if you're a truther, you're supposed to believe she's dead. I mean, that she's part of the death, that she's part of the killing, that Kirk is dead and she's part of it. Or Israel's part of it. Israel's taking over Turning Point USA because Kirk refused money. They're all running with this narrative lockstep. And we'll get into that in the next section when we talk about the controlled opposition reactions. But here's the thing. I'm suggesting that this idea that Erica Kirk is some kind of a villain here is constructed. So this came out last night. Emerson Drive, She's My Kind of Crazy. This is a music video from 13 years ago. Emerson Drive is a country music performer. She's My Kind of Crazy stars then Miss Arizona. So you've got, and thank you, Television, appreciate the support. We're trying to get into an office so we can expand what we do. We're getting there. And what we're doing is groundbreaking because everybody is talking about snake eyes and predictive programming, but very few are synthesizing, putting it all together. Like, what's the bigger picture? And we've got the bigger picture here. And we're seeing others who are getting very close to it, and I think we can help nudge them over that edge. It just takes a few terms and concepts to be defined clearly. But anyway, so this music video from 13 years ago has Erica, not Kirk at that point, but she's being married in Vegas. And interestingly, the pastor during the marrying is a Elvis pastor. Now, if you go to 2 minutes and 33 seconds into the video, what you see here is Erica Kirk swinging on one of those rides where you hold the bars and the zip line. So she's on a zip line. And as she's zipping over the word Fremont, high up above, she passes the numbers 9, 10. So again, what do you see in that? Well, 9, there she is zipping by. on the wire, and she's crossing 910 above the word Fremont. Well, right now, as we speak, Charlie Kirk is wearing a freedom shirt when he dies, which I think I'm going to kind of connect it. I've been connecting it to the Braveheart scene where he's crucified and he yells freedom. There's some deeper meanings to that term as well, freedom, as it may even relate to the Norse goddess, because there's a lot of Norse stuff. Valhalla, there's the Valkyrie group in the Hulu show. But there's a number of themes that have been repetitive here. So here she is passing the sign that says Fremont and under the 910. So immediately the association here, September the 10th, and then she's there swinging by. What is going on here? So this is already an interesting coincidence. But what makes it even more interesting is her own quote. So someone found a quote from Miss Arizona 13 years ago, and she's being lambasted over this, where she says, and let me pull this up because this raises a couple of points. Because we're talking about 13 years ago was, really before Charlie Kirk had even stepped onto the world stage. And she said, Miss Arizona USA 2012, what a blast, Tyler. And I had what a blast Tyler and I had shooting this video. I mean, consider the irony of this. What a blast Tyler and I had shooting this video, 9/10. Now, they're obviously referring to shooting a music video, but the coincidences here are a little much. Having a blast, 9/10, referencing the shooter by name. By the way, Tyler Robinson, the Annunciation shooter was Robin Westman. I've been here working on this, elaborating between the movies and these events, and there's quite a lot showing up. And the freedom stuff is interesting. The shirt, even the name Charles means free man. And right now there's some venue where he was supposed to speak and they gave away 5,000 shirts. So now there's 5,000 mini Charlies running around. So what are we to make of this? Well, look at the connections between Erica, Hulu's The Tempest, and the Jezebel witches associated with his death, and the movie Weapons, and Gladys. So what are we seeing here? Well, it looks to me like this is further indication that the death of Charlie Kirk was long ago scripted. And the name Tyler does have some significance if you look at the Masonic import of it, and Masonic symbolism has been prevalent in this event. We're talking about the 33s and the conspicuous 33 hours to catch the shooter who drove 3 hours and 30 minutes to get there. They put their numbers out there, their symbols. And this is just kind of reiterating it. But I'm suggesting here that the death of Charlie Kirk, the story, was already engineered. It was already written into Snake Eyes. And as I'll point out in a few, it was already written, weirdly enough, into the Marilyn Manson saga with his Coma White story based on a script called Hollywood about JFK as the second coming, which is something that QAnons believe. So this gets into some interesting turf, but we're bringing up the Jezebel witch connection, and does this implicate her? And it absolutely does, according to the right-wing conspiracy theorists. Bobby Hale says, have you looked into Jung's commentary on Wotan and the Tempest? No, I have not, but I'll have to, because we're talking about these Norse deities, repeated themes. So one more point here. Well, actually, let me go ahead and open up the Zoom. Anybody in Zoom, if you have anything to add to the Jezebel witches, or if you want to comment, now is a good time. And then we're going to get into the controlled opposition. Anime Gematria said, who is Jung? That's great. Anime Gematria says, who is Jung? That's inexcusable. There's a lot to be gleaned from Jung's explanation of synchronicity, but I don't think it's 100% accurate. It's a different topic. However, when people look at predictive programming, they often think it's mystical, and they get lost in the weeds. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about here. Okay, so the next subject, the next area of focus is the controlled opposition. So we need to talk about the controlled opposition responses to both two things. So Newsweek did a story on Snake Eyes. So in other words, there's mainstream coverage of the predictive programming in Snake Eyes. And I'm noting here that they're not talking about the Hulu thing, nor are they talking about any other things that we could point out. But they're singularly focused on this one thing. And why? Because it's safe. It's safe to point out the propaganda messaging in the movies if it's far enough in the past, because it can be easily dismissed. So here's what Newsweek wrote about it. Well, a couple of pull quotes. They said, multiple posts incorrectly claim that the film is set on the night of September the 10th, the day Kirk was killed. So it really starts off by trying to discredit the observations, and all the big channels that ran with it ran with the wrong date. And I said, hey, it's blurry, it's grainy, but that's not a zero. And they're going to use this. So here he has what people are saying. So here's the Intel SCIF on X, viewed over 5 million times, being quoted. There are no coincidences. The 1998 movie Snake Eyes with Nicolas Cage, the politician Charles Kirkland is shot in the neck. In the movie, the shooting happens on September the 10th. Kirk was shot in the neck in real life on September the 10th. You can't make this up. So he got it wrong. Didn't mention the name of the shooter being prevalent as the executioner Tyler. So it wasn't really a complete breakdown, nor did he mention the Taj Mahal and the Trump connections, which is fine. I'm just saying Newsweek is only focusing on those who don't get it entirely. Bobby Hale says, in Snake Eyes, watched through yesterday, I noticed the assassin hides behind the words Miller, like Stephen Miller. Fascinating. Okay, so then you have Melissa Red Pill, which is already a red flag, on X, and she says, are we living in a matrix simulation? In the 1998 movie Snake Eyes, Defense Secretary Charles Kirkland is shot on the left side of his neck during a fight of Lincoln Tyler. So that's all intriguing in itself. And he says the detective is distracted by a guy with blonde hair. So if you remember the guy shouting USA, USA, well, they have a similar character in this scene, which it's a perfect mirror. So what I'm pointing out here, though, is that predictive programming is being acknowledged quite widely right now. It's being mainstreamed, but they're not getting it right. As in, they're still like clueless, like who could be behind this? What is the purpose? What does this reveal? And this is what it reveals. It reveals that the story that was played out on September the 10th was already written. It was already written before he even took that role. That he's a manufactured martyr, and all those people who have politicized their religion, all these Christian conservatives and nationalists who fell for it, they cannot see what their teachings would describe as wolves in sheep's clothing. Absolutely zero discernment. So another point I have to bring up, because again, the controlled opposition with regard to the predictive programming stuff, they don't get it right, and that's fine. But the other aspect of it is all the controlled oppositions are saying that he's dead. Their starting point is he's dead. So I asked to Candace Owens, Owen Schroyer, Ian Carroll, Stu Peters, I said, why do you assume Charlie Kirk is dead? Because you're all controlled opposition. Anyone pushing alternative media conspiracies which assume he was actually killed are suspect. And I said also, admit it, you're not allowed to go there. So this is a litmus test. If you want to know whether or not you're listening to controlled opposition agents, all you need to do is ask them, do you think Charlie could still be alive? They won't even go there. They can't discuss it. I mean, it's possible they might bring it up just to bat it to the side and call you crazy, but they will not discuss that as a remote possibility. Yet there's a growing body of people who are. So those who are going with this could be faked have a completely different take on media than even the conspiracy theorists. And they're not platformed, except here. And this is why. So now it's a great time to draw a distinction between controlled opposition and authentic researchers. Lieutenant Weinberg says, yeah, look, a lot of people think he died, but what is their evidence? And this is what we're going to get into. So what is the evidence that he died? I saw it on TV is not good enough. Because when we say he's not dead, our evidence isn't I saw it on TV so it's fake. I saw it on TV so it's real is the same thing as I saw it on TV so it's fake. And I've been really promoting the idea of the blindfolded skeptic here, where you shouldn't need to deconstruct the visuals. You shouldn't need to rely on them to be very bad at performing their psyops. You shouldn't worry about their special effects failing to see through it. If that's all you have, then you're not going to see anything as fake in the future when they improve. So first of all, Charlie Kirk is not dead. This was a magic show, not a snuff film. Anyone asserting he's dead is only repeating hearsay and see-say. Because you see it on your black mirror doesn't make it real. Deception in mass media, and this shouldn't be news to anybody here, but deception in mass media is a feature, not a bug. So the normies, those who adhere to mainstream mediation, believe that Charlie Kirk was killed by Tyler Robinson, who was caught predictably 33 hours later. Truthers, who are MSM+, they believe he's dead, but they don't know whether it was the second shooter, the third shooter, the fourth shooter, the fifth shooter, the sixth shooter, the seventh shooter, the eighth shooter, the exploding mic, or the Chinese space lasers. But all they know is Benjamin Netanyahu financed the assassination. So Israel did it. So mainstream and alternative both agree he's dead. They just disagree on who did it. Skeptics subtract the unverifiable claims from any media event. And having done so, I don't have enough information to accept the claim that he's dead, but rather I have a lot of hoax indicators. So here's where we're at. As a skeptic, we cannot believe in these events if hoax indicators are present. So before anybody can assert that it's real, they have to deal with the hoax indicators. To not address these is to be a denialist, to deny reality itself. So I could list off a number of hoax indicators. We're talking about deviations from standard protocol. We're talking about predictive concurrent programming stuff, immediately implementable political agendas, lockstep narrative promulgation by the influencers that we pretty much can predict will have these opinions. I mean, that alone, the fact that it fits a template is a hoax indicator. But we have to remember, too, this is the big deception. Owen Schroyer, Candace Owens, Ian Carroll, they're not journalists. They're not investigators. They're not like us, trying to uncover the truth because the media is lying. No, they don't actually have original opinions or thoughts. And so if you recall when this thing unfolded, Candace Owens says, I saw the video from behind Charlie, there was no blood. And a number of people said, hey, maybe she figured out that it's all fake and she's going to blow the whistle on it. And I said, no, she will never say that it's fake. She's not allowed to. She's setting you up. And they held out hope that she was going to wake up. And note, the next day she said, this proves that it was another shooter because the large caliber round from the Patsy would have shot through his neck. And so now they're saying that the Superman story, Man of Steel neck, was fake. And all that does, again, is it introduces the idea that another person or another gun did it. So again, hoax indicators is the main point I have to bring up here. Before you can say it's real, you have to deal with the hoax indicators. And if you don't know what those are, you can ask us or you can do your own research. But you have to refute those. And one of the main ones is the templated rollout of the event itself. Yeah, the neck of steel. And here's an interesting one. So the neck of steel thing. So the neck of steel means that he stopped the bullet with his neck. He's like Superman. After the shooting, the shooter runs to Dairy Queen and he poses next to a poster of Superman. And in that particular shot, he happens to look like Lex Luthor from the latest movie. Now, Superman, if you watch the movie, is coded with sun god savior, 33-year-old. It has all the same Christ stuff attached to it. So to attach Charlie Kirk to Superman in the context of a miracle is syncretized with Christ. So it's not just comic book stuff. It actually has a deeper underlying meaning. It's archetypal imagery. So you have that Superman thing. But in Lost, which is a TV show on Netflix that I watched this episode, there's a character named Charlie who's shot on the left side of the neck and he dies. Now, the actor was 31 at the time, but again, Charlie shot in the neck, like the same wound. So we're talking about this theme that has existed prior to this final event, which is very consistent. I mean, we have more than half a dozen examples of real-time media occurrences, as in or entertainment releases, rather, that foreshadowed what happened to Trump and Butler. Highly consistent. This is a pattern. That's why, okay, so if you're going to say this is real, then you need to explain the Hulu release and Kirk having just been over there and the Snake Eyes stuff in the same breath as it's real. Because now you're saying it's real, but it was foreshadowed. But what's the explanation for that? And the explanation used to be, oh, this was done by the simulation in the Matrix, and we're all video game characters. Well, that doesn't suffice anymore. It was done by the same people who faked the events. Because another aspect to it here that sim theory can't explain, or any other mystical theory, is that there are concurrent drills with nearly every one of these psyops. This one included. You had a thing at Utah right before. Some kind of, I guess it was a drill for mass casualty evacuation, something. My point is, the timing of drills with the events, with the entertainment counterparts, shows that it's got a common author. It's what I call the PSYOP entertainment complex. So one of the final barriers that truthers have to contend with is the bloody guardrail. So the bloody guardrail has people thinking they're watching a snuff film. No, it's not a snuff film. It's a magic show. And there's many reasons why they don't kill people in psychological operations. For the same reason you don't kill people in mass casualty simulations. It's a simulated event. So the burden of proof to accept what the media reports lies with the media. It always has. And every hoax indicator shifts the burden to the other side. And there are more than enough hoax indicators to shift the burden of proof back to those who are saying he's really dead. And until a news believer can address each of these and refute them, and all the indicators of media fakery, then they don't have a truth claim when it comes to Kirk being dead. And one of the big points here, one of the big indicators, is how this fits the pattern of every previously discussed fake event. Jacques says, can you name one news story that is real specifically? Well, yeah, here's something I'll say. We're not claiming everything is fake. That's a horrible straw man argument. We're saying some things are fake. But it's the fake things, the expensive influence operations, these expensive psyops that get all the clicks, get all the attention, and everybody bounces off of it. So the entire media ecosystem is contaminated by fakery. It contaminates, it influences. So it's not like everything is fake, but I will say everybody's deceived. Everybody in media is deceived, or their operating premise on every story presumes that what came before is the truth. So this is the point where the world stage gets into it, the concept of the world stage. Well, what is the world stage? The world stage is the worldview that the consensus accepts as true, as presented on TV, and as preceded by our consensus agreement on what happened historically. So like 9/11, COVID, a bunch of shootings, all of these events that happen in sequence that lead to where we are right now. 10-7, all the major events. Those things are the points of agreement. And so all these points of agreement are what the mainstream perspective rests upon. So even if you're an honest journalist, you're still a liar because you're in a lie-contaminated environment. Yeah, Owen Benjamin thinks it's real, and he thinks that we need digital ID. What's his name? Hyde? Sam Hyde? Sam Hyde says, "You are all Charlie Kirk. We are Charlie Kirk. I am Charlie Kirk." So Sam Hyde sells this story and the subway throat slashing, which are connected. I think the throat stuff is connected. Like Trump's would-be assassin trying to stab himself in the neck. But this is important though. This is a big one because my contention here is that the Charlie Kirk assassination is meant to be as big and as significant in terms of its political import as the JFK assassination. And notice how they targeted the youth with this one. That's another key facet here. And my reason for saying it was planned a long time ago and not like last month is Snake Eyes in particular, but also a number of other elements we could point out. And we're looking at the entire media ecosystem as monolithic, as a closed system. And if you look at my video I put up there, you got to see the Charlie Sheen stuff that relates. It all ties into the JFK assassination. And if you didn't watch Snake Eyes again, before they walk into the boxing ring, the room, the venue, they're on the way walking in, and Nicolas Cage's character is talking to the venue owner who says, "I need this interview. This could be big." It's like the JFK assassination, breaking Dan Rather's career or establishing his career. So he's talking about how Dan Rather built his career off the JFK assassination. And he's saying that this boxing match with Tyler the Executioner was going to blow up his career. So before the thing even happened, they made the JFK connection. And there's a ton of JFK connections with this Charlie Kirk thing that have been deliberately foisted upon it. It's been blended with it, and it's not unintentional. So let's go into the next point here. This is the topic I got into last night. The coincidental timing of Marilyn Manson's One Assassination Under God tour. Is this concurrent programming for Charlie Kirk's death? Is this metascript in music? So right now, Marilyn Manson is on his One Assassination Under God tour. And I took note of this because the timing of his release. He released it on the 61st anniversary of JFK's assassination. And we thought this album might foreshadow the next Trump thing because it was too late to be relevant to Butler. But if you look at his past, his music was tied up with the Columbine shooters. And his music had one of his videos, 1999, Coma White, had to be delayed because it somehow had connections to the JFK Jr. death. So these are some relevant connections to this particular musician's work from 1999 as it relates to JFK and the shooter thing. So first of all, I watched the video One Assassination Under God, and it has him as the umbrella man of the JFK assassination. It has him walking a goat, like a sacrificial goat. Frequent mentions of sacrifice, frequent mentions of entertainment. And one other point, he did a song, King Kill 33, which is the article about the occult symbolism behind the JFK assassination. So none of these symbols are accidental. In fact, in King Kill 33, the author, James Shelby Downard, describes JFK as the pharmakos, a sacrificial goat. Now, the name of the album and the song, one assassination under God, one nation under God. Obviously, he's combining assassination and nation. And I think what this represents is a nation founded on a sacrifice. And I think this calls to mind, for me anyway, the Christian nationalism that we see emerging with Turning Point USA. So this is one assassin. So in other words, I think Charlie Kirk is what this album and song was foreshadowing. I think this music is meant to be concurrent programming and a backdrop. And I'm saying this because Trump's not going to be assassinated. It was an attempt. It just pierced his ear. Nowhere in the body of predictive programming do they actually take him out. If you think about it, that's what doesn't happen. It's always a grazing. It's always a just missed. It's an attempt. And this has been the case in all the mentions I could make. And a lot of them are very specific. Ear wounds, blood on the face. The one with De Niro, he gets shot in the leg. But the point of it is he doesn't die, so it's not technically that. But the Charlie Kirk thing fits. So now you have the video with the goat representing JFK, which is also a kind of a Jesus thing in terms of the scapegoat in Jewish ritual, carrying away the sins, the sacrifice. But so now going back to 1999, Manson put out a video for Coma White where he played the role of JFK and he gets assassinated. So I rewatched the video. Anybody care to guess where he gets shot? Now, a few notes on it. Coma White was inspired by a script called Holy Wood. And the idea, quote, is that there were two previous Christs. There was Jesus and JFK. Now, the world awaits the third savior. So this would make it JFK Jr. This is the QAnon story. And this is way back in 1999. However, as the music video is being released, JFK Jr. crashes and dies. On the day Eyes Wide Shut comes out, interestingly. But in the music video, I see JFK on a crucifix. They've got his photograph on a crucifix. And then you see Marilyn Manson on a cross. No, Marilyn Manson in the video, Coma White, playing as JFK, is shot in the neck. So I was thinking, okay, I was thinking that there would be some relevance to this new release, the present tour, and the Charlie Kirk assassination. And then, sure enough, the album comes out, like I said, on the anniversary of JFK, and I thought this has got to be foreshadowing. And I watched the video, and he gets shot in the neck. I did not see that coming. So it's not. This is my point here. Kirk's entire persona was a role all along. That he was here to be a JFK-like martyr. This was a generational psyop. Because what did JFK do? Think about the big picture. What did the JFK assassination establish? It established the entire conspiracy culture and firmly pointed all of their conspiracies at Israel. And that has not changed from day one. Dwayne Arbith says, has anyone mentioned that Manson pretended to shoot his audience a month before the CK hoax? Wouldn't surprise me. Now, this manufactured martyr, a sacrifice, you will always be entertained. He mentions pulling back a curtain. I get the idea here that this is both foreshadowing and concurrent. And it wasn't just a song about JFK from 61 years ago, but it's a song about this idea of founding a nation upon a bloody sacrifice, a Christ-like event, a crucifixion, more or less. So the Christification of Charlie Kirk, the JFKification of Charlie Kirk is plainly evident if you look. The association of him with Superman, even, all these little things, it's part of this characterization that they built up. Then we have the King Killed 33 song, which, again, it's all about this book, James Shelby Downard, who wrote about the idea of the JFK assassination was not a political act, but a murder orchestrated by Freemasons. So he still thinks the guy died. But he tied it in to the killing of the king rite, which comes from Fraser's Golden Bow. And it's this idea that the young king could be sacrificed in order to, I guess, bring prosperity to the kingdom. It's just kind of this pagan thing, which you see played out in Apocalypse Now. There's a copy of Golden Bow in Apocalypse Now when they decapitate the lost colonel. I mean, it's a fascinating kind of a reference, but that's what King Kill 33 is about. And so my point is, there's no way that his previous songs or releases could be this connected to the Kennedy saga and this one not be. Because here's what actually happened. When Coma White came out, the MTV premiere was delayed. They delayed it because of the Columbine High School massacre, because they said the band inspired it. Then it was going to be released in the summer, and they delayed it again because the JFK Jr. death. And so Manson comes out and he says that, and this is a quote, he says, "This enacted the journey of death. Little did I know the tragedy at Columbine and the death of JFK Jr. would follow." So there's a direct interaction between the artist, his music, and these major psyops, specifically with the Kennedy stuff, going into the esoteric of it and this idea of JFK as savior, which again, this stuff is intrinsic to the QAnon narrative, which is built into this totally engineered conspiracy subculture. Totally engineered. Yeah, that's right. Martin Sheen was in Apocalypse Now. And now Charlie Sheen is out on Tucker Carlson talking about Erica Kirk and how she's like this widow and all this stuff. And again, he was on Joe Rogan when they were talking about the JFK assassination, and then they talked about the Charlie Kirk thing. And again, Joe Rogan is a top podcast in the world. So the idea that you're having this concerted messaging is what I'm emphasizing. It's in the movies, it's on the podcasts, it's in the Twitter sphere, it's on Hulu. This merging of fiction and, quote, reality on the world stage is how they perform and create and write our history. Bobby Hale says, is it possible there are factions among the hoaxers? No. No, because the bifurcation, the so-called political horseshoe, is part of the design. And it's like this on every issue. It's to the point where the model is stable enough I regularly make predictions based upon it. So for example, the AA flight hits the black helicopter, and I said, it's probably a drill, but the right wing's going to blame it on DEI, left wing's going to blame it on Trump and Musk cutting government programs, cutting funding, reducing the number of air traffic controllers. And sure enough, the opinions are always perfectly split down the middle. And neither side calls the other side's influence operations fake. They're united in fakery. This is revealed in Butler. You think that if there was a faction, that somebody on the left would call the Trump thing as fake? Yeah, what do I think of him catching the killer in 33 hours? Exactly, it's predictable. Real life doesn't follow a predictable template. I said if this is fake, because I saw the video, I said it looked real. I said if this is fake, there's going to be something on Netflix that perfectly mirrors it. Well, it wasn't Netflix, it was Disney Hulu. But it was beyond perfect. I mean, it was beyond what I suspected, because not only do you have the character in the church being shot in the same part of the neck, and it's the New Republicans, which is like TPUSA. Same thing with the widow crying over the body. There's a lot of overlapping elements, but the timing of the release put this movie on blast as the real thing happened. And then Charlie Kirk was just there a few days before. And then the story follows, tracking the widow taking over the organization. And it's followed along with what has happened on the world stage. Too many overlaps. And again, The Tempest, I'm still watching it, directly connects with Snake Eyes, with the storm, Hurricane Jezebel. Bobby Hale asks, I'm not thinking so much left and right, but factions with opposing agendas. I think there might be some legitimate competition here and there, but no, it's monolithic, it's uniform. It will not be usurped. Its power is incontestable. We live in, essentially, it's a totalitarian system, and there is no platform for any kind of thinking that doesn't treat it as fundamentally real. In fact, they diagnose it. That, I think, one of the reasons why, like, they'll psychopathologize it. I think one of the reasons why they actually spread a lot of conspiracy theories is they want the people who ask questions to look like they have apophenia, to look like they're spotting patterns where there aren't patterns. But one of the fascinating things here is that once in a while, the number of people noticing, quote, predictive programming gets so high that they have to address it and dismiss it, which is what they did with Snake Eyes. But there's no way they're going to talk about the Hulu thing. Hey, what's up in Zoom? Anybody in Zoom here have any sort of thing you want to add? Right now we're talking about hoax indicators and the burden of proof. Oh yeah, why don't you tell us about George Zinn? That's the older man who looked like James Carville, who was screaming that he did it or something. Okay, so for those on YouTube, George Zinn was a witness of 9/11 and one of those who called in regarding the Boston bombers, which that's that's not really atypical. You do find a lot of repetition. Like, for example, the chief of police overseeing the Vegas PSYOP, the Harvest Festival, was there in Maui when you had the Maui fires. So the fact that you have repeated characters, not a surprise to me at all. Yeah, if you post it here, and I'll be sure to mention this because another point too is none of these events, none of these psychological operations are in a vacuum. They're all connected. 9/11 has everything to do with the Charlie Kirk shooting, has everything to do with every other fake event. Same production company. It's these are all top-down things. So the fact that you have overlapping actors is highly interesting. Sure, sure. And so, what do you think about my take on the controlled opposition? Do you think that any of these popular conspiracy theorists will address the idea that Charlie Kirk might actually still be alive, or do you think that they're all gatekeeping? Yeah, well, so this is something because a lot of people are looking at this as, can we show on video evidence of the fakery? And I have to emphasize that the special effects are going to improve. Generative AI is going to improve. There's no denying this. So what are you going to do when the special effects are so good that you cannot call it fake solely based upon the visuals? And anybody who's still focused on trying to unravel it on the visuals alone is behind the times. Because you can deconstruct one of these solely based on the peripheral information. For example, Lesko says overlapping actors is a hoax indicator. Yeah, list all the hoax indicators, and without even addressing the video, you should be able to say it's fake. Otherwise, it becomes a battle of opinions. Like, that looks like this to me, looks like that to them, and it doesn't actually have any kind of objective merit as a point of debate because the normies will believe what they're told to believe. Even truthers. If they're told it's real, they'll think it's real. If they're told it's fake, they'll think it's fake. So again, our deconstruction has to go beyond just the visuals. Imagine you're at a magic show. If you're in your seat, you cannot tell how they do these tricks. So you might as well just enjoy the show. You have to wait till after the magic show to go backstage and to do some research to figure it out. So to address it, how do we know if these people are controlled opposition? We can know with a great deal of certainty. There's no need for ambiguity here. If somebody is saying it's a second shooter, it's a third shooter, it was TPUSA, it was a space laser, if somebody is deviating from the mainstream interpretation, but they won't go so far as to suggest it was staged as the evidence would indicate, they are a controlled opposition. And I can say this confidently because this has been the observed pattern from day one. Whenever there's a shooting, right-wingers will say it was a trans shooter or it was somebody on antidepressants. Every single time. None of them will say, hey, it's a fake event. Look at these laughing actors. And by the way, this Charlie Kirk event did have the boilerplate laughing crisis actors. This actress comes out, she's laughing. And she's like, yeah, I saw Charlie. He got shot in the chest and blood was just spraying everywhere and he fell forward. Then you have this other man. Yeah, he got shot and he fell to the side, to his right side. In other words, we had inaccurate eyewitness reports. So inaccurate eyewitness reports from laughing people, indicators. These don't happen in real life. If you think about it too, it's a crime scene. How many ways did this crime scene deviate from standard operating procedures? Every one of these deviations from standard protocol is a hoax indicator, and there were plenty. Soul 101 says, what's with Kirk's wife's connection with the disappearance of children in Romania? Yeah, I saw that entire narrative, and what they have done is they have established for the woke right the idea that Erica Kirk was behind, that she's the Jezebel witch, and she took out her own husband, and that she took over TPUSA at the behest of Israel, because he was about to swing and pivot Turning Point USA to the right wing against the neocons, against Israel. And before that could happen, they took him out. And their argument, too, is that he was taken out by his own Israeli security team. So all of this implicates her. And now they're looking at her background and they're saying that she was basically a very cold, calculating, unemotional widow. They're pointing out how she's not even crying, how she looks like she's enjoying her position having taken over. They're suggesting that this was a long-term plot to kill him. That's what they're all saying. And I'm saying, no, they're correct in that it was a long-term plot. It was a long-term plot to fake his death. But that's the bloody guardrail. If they can't cross the bloody guardrail, if they can't get past the idea that the martyr isn't really dead, then they're controlled opposition. You see the same pattern with George Floyd. They all agree George Floyd died. But the guardrailers will say, but he died of fentanyl, not of our system. It wasn't systemic racism and a racist cop. No, it was fentanyl, which is Biden's fault for opening the borders. So if you look at how these stories play out, the controlled opposition will always default to they're dead, but this other party's responsible. It's always a DARVO, or it's about denying, avoiding responsibility, reversing victim offender role. It's a manipulation tactic, in fact. But they never go full fake. If they don't say squib, if they can't entertain that he's not dead, they're controlled. It's that simple. Ninja Nomic says, I can't stand They Live Truth, but they put out an interesting show about the handlers. Yeah, Russian Vids did a pretty good breakdown of the video showing how the response of the people around Charlie seemed to be very well rehearsed, like they were expecting it, that nobody was acting like they would normally act. And he has a strong point there. Like, I don't disagree with what he's saying. I'm just saying that that those arguments aren't going to work with normal people. And it doesn't make the case because it becomes opinion. If you know what you're looking at, sure. But if your starting premise is that the news media doesn't lie and they don't use special effects, it doesn't get anywhere. So I think we have to move somewhere next. Like, we have to move past that. Now we have to look at deconstructing events without over-reliance on the visuals. We have to accumulate the list of hoax indicators and then shove those in the face of people who say that he's really dead. Well, then you deal with this. You sit there with a pile of eerie coincidences and you chalk it up to whatever you think you can, and then we can debate those on the merits. But we've moved past that. I don't think that truthers are aware of how engineered our worldview is. Because it's not just the fake news day by day that we're talking about here. We're talking about the accumulation of it over decades. I mean, it actually goes back further. Last night we were talking about how the director of the Manchurian Candidate, now Manchurian Candidate has a connection here. It's a 1962 film about a mind-controlled assassin. And many see this as mirroring the JFK assassination. And the director actually is or was friends with JFK. Now, it was directed by John Frankenheimer. The significance here is that not only was John Frankenheimer a director of a movie that was considered eerily similar to the JFK assassination, but he was also the one who drove Robert F. Kennedy to the Ambassador Hotel and was present for that assassination. By what? Oh, he was taken out by a mind-controlled assassin, Saran, just like the Manchurian Candidate. So what are the odds that a movie director who specializes in political assassinations by mind-controlled operatives is associated with two of the most famous political assassinations by mind-control operatives? Bobby Hale says, what do you make of the premise of the assassination in Snake Eyes having to do with the faulty Israeli air defense system? How might that come back up in this story that they're telling with Palantir? Yeah, that's a great point. I noticed that the story does revolve around a Palestinian patsy. And right now, like Laura Loomer, huge shill, is saying that there's going to be an Islamic attack on America any minute now. And the woke right are doing nothing about it because they're too focused on their Jew hatred. And now the woke right is saying, hey, look, Laura Loomer says that Muslims are going to attack, so we can go ahead and infer here that Israel is going to attack and false flag us, and they're going to blame it on Muslims. Ninjanomics says, RV is highly suspicious, acts as though he were the arbiter of what's true and false, and his followers act like cult zealots. Yeah, one thing I'll say about his methodology here is that he does sort of appeal to himself as the expert. So you're going to him because he's finding this stuff and he's an expert at decoding videos, which is great. But I think it leans too much on his opinion to make his case. And that's fine if you know what you're looking at. But it's not going to be good enough as generative AI improves, as special effects improve. So I'm just saying that his methodology has an expiration date. I think it's already passed. I like a lot of these channels who break these things down. I like Miles Mathis and his writings. But his methodology is look up the last names of the people involved and somehow show Jewish heritage. It's like, I'm sorry, but that's not a methodology. That's not a process that we can employ when it comes to how we assess the media landscape. Dark Ghost Wind says, will they stop with Kirk or will we see another? So that's a very good question. I had this book, Metascript Decoded, in 2020, and I had this idea that they would take out a civil rights type leader and the video itself would be used as a justification for censorship because it's too incendiary. And we might then see the implementation of censorship on the internet, a blackout, a censorship agenda, sort of like COVID lockdowns before the internet. And that's kind of happening here. But I think that this is the assassination that we were expecting. This was the transformative event, the quote turning point. I don't think it requires another one. I mean, I've seen this Trump stuff, and we followed it closer, almost as close as anybody on the subject. But at no point in the predictive programming do they actually take him out. It's always an attempt. He always survives. And so what we got wasn't that spectacular, but that might be all that we're going to get with regard to that particular event. The actual assassination is probably CK, Charlie Kirk. Yeah, so the movie with Nicolas Cage is a crazy movie. I watched it, and it does have a lot of connections. But again, it shows you that the Charlie Kirk saga pre-existed him. The script was already there. And The Hulu series, The Tempest, was released on September 10th, and it has even more connections. So anybody who gets lost in, I can't understand Snake Eyes, well, then wait till you see The Tempest. Because when you do look at it, that should be enough to push somebody over the edge. It should be enough. If you can look at the Snake Eyes and the Hulu, The Tempest, as foreshadowing and concurrently mirroring the real event, it should make the point about how controlled our media ecosystem is and how what they're doing, what is the point of it? They created a martyr. The media has supplanted religion, and they create martyrs and myths. We get miracles. We get events like this that constitute mythology, basically state-created myths, but they become events in our shared history. So every element of our history, every major event or, quote, turning point, if you look back, seems to fit the pattern of having been scripted in advance. Like, our history is manipulated, written in advance. It's performed in front of our eyes. And a lot of it's fake. Hey, what's up? Yeah, let me bring that up really quick. So in my book, Metascript Decoded, I did have a prediction that they would be doing a headshot of a symbolic leader. And I thought it was going to be because of his association with kneeling during the national anthem and his role in Super Bowl 47, which is code 47, like the 47 hats in front of Kirk. I thought it was going to be Colin Kaepernick, another CK. I thought if they do him on TV, that could be this, quote, turning point I was expecting. And it would necessitate a lot of blackouts of the internet, censorship. However, despite this setup for such a thing, that didn't actually happen. But as soon as this happened, Colin Kaepernick's back in the news with this individual named Trey Reed. Now, Trey Reed supposedly hanged from a tree, and some think he was lynched. So now Colin Kaepernick is paying for a new autopsy. So Kaepernick is strongly connected with BLM, which is a martyr cult, which all started off with Trayvon Martin. But the name of this one, though, Trey, again, fits the pattern that I alluded to earlier. But his full name is DeTray Martin Vaughn. Like DeTrayvon Martin is basically, his name is a very loose anagram for Trayvon Martin. So that comes out where now you have Colin Kaepernick organizing around a supposed lynching, another Trayvon Martin getting the body dug up so they can do another autopsy. And then Donald Trump's nephew, the rapper, comes out with a pro-lynching song, and he shows up at Charlie Kirk's event. So I was thinking, maybe I was correct in assessing that this guy was a target, but maybe it happens as a retaliation. Because we're talking about symbolic figureheads, leaders. But my point is, if you look back at that book from 2020, I did point out the code here, the Christ stuff, the CK 31133. I noted the code. So it's interesting that we do see the same stuff with the Charlie Kirk thing. Not a coincidence, because we're looking at repetition, templates, code, symbolism, subtext. Dark Ghost Wind says, Peter Thiel is an anagram for the reptile. Yeah, what is with that guy? I want to follow up on his Antichrist stuff. But let's get back on track here. So we talked about the controlled opposition. Anybody who won't talk about Kirk being alive is controlled opposition. You can challenge them. Go on X. Hey, Stu Peters. Hey, Candace Owens. Hey, Ian Carroll. Why are you all starting on the presupposition he's dead? Ninjanomics says, the question is, can this Metascript be done by Metascripters on paper, or have they had access to AI or computers since the 1900s? No, absolutely. This is all being done just by centralized control over media. It's just a bunch of people. It's man manipulating man. No need for AI. AI couldn't do most of the stuff right now. People have this exaggerated concept of how good it is. It's not there yet. Look, they've been deep faking us before digital deep fakes using masks. They already deep fake you with espionage, with lies, with false identities. Even without the visuals, the disguises, our consensus reality has been deeply warped. And every day of fake news is a page in our history. Now, you brought up the calculations and numerological rituals are so complex. So here's one thing. Anybody pushing gematria connections or counting dates between events, they may not know it, but they're muddying the waters. And I'm saying this because what we're doing isn't cherry picking. It's not selectivity bias. It's not the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. Concurrent programming debunks that. It refutes that attempt at refutation. They say, oh, you guys are just exercising selective bias and you've got a large body of content to draw from, so snake eyes just happen to line up, but you're ignoring the ones that don't line up. No, you can't say that anymore because we're finding consistent real-time alignments that actually correspond with the older stuff. So that goes out. However, when people come up with, well, hey, this movie came out 666 days before this actor was born, and then on his 33rd birthday, he did this. Okay, you can make connections. You can use gematria, and you can find connections, but those would be classified as fallacious. They don't make any predictions. And so the way this works is you make 50 connections with your numerology, and then you find 5 that are really strong, and you point out, hey, look at these 5 connections. That's the Texas sharpshooter, where he shoots a bunch of rounds into the side of a barn, and then he draws the target after the fact around the tightly grouped shots. So you can dispense with all the dates, the number dates, the numerology dates, the gematria. I mean, there may be some stuff there. There is a lot of stuff there. There's subtext, there's narrative subtext, there's archetypes, there's illusions, literary illusions, there's foreshadowing. And yeah, there are numbers, there's anagrams, ambigrams, it's all there. There are names that have very specific and ironic significance to their roles. Was it aptonyms? However, the rest of the stuff, it can often fall into this area of mystification where someone says, hey, these connections are so complex, it could not have been done by man. And if they can get you to say this could not be done by man, they effectively misdirected you. So now you're not going to see the metascript, which is the man-authored history that we're living through. History is a construct. It's not an objective record of what happened. It's being recorded by liars. All right, so let's go ahead and get through the list here. So we talked about controlled opposition with regard to CK, controlled opposition with regard to predictive programming, and we talked about hoax indicators. Hoax indicators which you have to address if you're going to say anything's real that has been called out as likely fake. Fuentes was commenting on Snake Eyes, and he made it look ridiculous because all they have is they have to tell us for the karma. Yeah, revelation of the method is another one of these misdirection lines. Like they have to tell us what they're going to do because the bad wizards don't want bad karma. Like that's ridiculous on the face of it, but they're not telling us what they're going to do. They're telling us what they're going to fake. Why would they need to absolve themselves of guilt and karma for events they're going to fake in the future? So no, that's done. So what we're doing, the IPS think tank is really the vanguard of this, is we're moving past the bloody guardrail. And anybody who's not past the bloody guardrail is controlled opposition, or they haven't done their due diligence and haven't addressed the hoax indicators, and their opinions are therefore invalid. If you're saying it's real and you haven't done your homework with regard to any of the indicators that we have listed here, then your opinion is actually very shallow. It's called a low information take. We don't need low information belief. We don't need low information disbelief. We are informed disbelievers, or we know what we know. I mean, that's really our standard here. By the way, a Netflix documentary came out in September of 2021 called Turning Point, 9/11 and the War on Terror. And it has the Twin Towers, Turning Point, 9/11, and these soldiers marching down the street. I'm just pointing it out because on 9/11, the leader of Turning Point 4 years later was being escorted in a casket by J.D. Vance. Oh, aptronyms. Yes, names that pertain to the person's real life role on the world stage in a very literary way. So again, the idea that you have 9/11 Turning Point on Netflix associated with the month of September, and the leader of Charlie Kirk is on TV on 9/11 that date, and then it's declared the turning point, probably not insignificant. And I mentioned the season 4, episode 8 of The Boys that foreshadowed the Trump assassination attempt and how they had to alter the title. Well, there's a spin-off of The Boys called Generation 5. Season 2, episode 4 has a goat named Elon Musk. They levitate the goat and blow it up. So if predictive programming is any indicator of what's to come, what's to be faked, and you can look at The Boys yourself, this one has a reputation already, then it's safe to say there's something in the cards for Musk. Levitating and exploding sacrificial goat, make of that what you will. I happen to think it may not bode well for any attempt at him going into space. All right, LG says, he may be alive. Do they have to get plastic surgery to be used again? It depends. It seems like with Timothy McVeigh, they just let him age. But who knows? I'm sure, though, they have all that we need. If the person that we saw wasn't being subtly manipulated anyway. You know, they can put a prosthetic nose on, little modifications that can dramatically alter your appearance. So he may already have been altered to a great deal. We don't really know. What we do know is that the belief that he was actually killed rests upon your faith in what you saw on TV and goes contrary to all of the indicators that this was a staged event, and they do not kill people in psyops. Dwayne Abith said Michael Hoffman coined the revelation of the method term. Yeah, he's also associated with James Downard and King Kill 33. These individuals are all associated. All right, well, if you just showed up, I'm probably going to delete the YouTube, but I'm going to re-upload the Zoom version, which includes other people who have things to say and what I've shown on the screen. Oh, it's pronounced Gen V, not Gen 5. Okay, thank you. Conscious Reality says Erica Kirk, KKK, blonde hair, blue eyes, Aryan Nation. Yeah, also, I think she's intended to look like a Valkyrie, who are the Norse goddess maidens who escort the fallen warriors to Valhalla, where he went. And in the show The Tempest, and again, she's the Storm, the guy protecting the widow works for the Valkyries. All right, thanks on YouTube. Thanks for your comments. I'm going to go back to the Zoom conference. Get on the newsletter so you don't miss the next Zoom.